The sound of knuckles rapping against the classroom door interrupted Miss Bennet's reading lesson. The school counselor stood in the doorway, her face a careful mask of professional calm that couldn't quite hide the concern in her eyes. "I need to see Sophia Martinez," she said quietly. 8-year-old Sophia looked up, her small shoulders tensing beneath her faded purple sweater. The other third graders whispered and stared as she slowly closed her notebook, the butterfly stickers on its cover suddenly seeming childish against the gravity settling over the room. "Bring your things, sweetie," Miss Bennet said gently. In the hallway, Sophia clutched her backpack against her chest like armor. The school counselor knelt down to her level, her voice soft but direct. "Sophia, there are some people here who need to talk to you about what you wrote in your journal yesterday, about what happens at your uncle's house." Tears welled in Sophia's dark eyes. "You promised nobody would read it," she whispered. "You said our journals were private. Sometimes, when a child might be in danger, adults have to break promises to keep them safe," the counselor explained. "You're not in trouble, Sophia, but what you wrote, we need to make sure you're okay." As they turned the corner toward the principal's office, Sophia froze. Through the glass doors at the end of the hallway, she could see them waiting, police officers, a woman in a suit clutching a folder, and behind them, parked along the curb, her uncle's black truck. "He's here," Sophia whispered, her voice breaking with terror. "He said if I ever told anyone, nobody would believe me. He said he'd take me away where nobody could find me. What happened next would change everything. Not just for one frightened child who dared to tell the truth, but for an entire community that rose up to ensure she would never face her abuser alone again. Are you ready to witness how an army of bikers became the shield that protected Sophia when the system couldn't? Subscribe now to join us on this incredible journey of courage, truth, and unexpected guardians. The Martinez family had been fixtures in the small town of Riverdale for generations. Sophia's grandparents had opened the local bakery 40 years earlier, passing it down to their daughter Elena, Sophia's mother, who ran it with the same dedication and famous family recipes that had made it a town institution. Elena Martinez was a pillar of strength in the community, volunteering at the school, organizing food drives, raising Sophia alone after her husband's death in a construction accident 4 years ago. Nobody would have guessed the terrible secret hiding beneath their seemingly ordinary lives. Roberto Martinez, Elena's brother-in-law, had moved in with them temporarily after Sophia's father died. What was meant to be a short-term arrangement to help with the bakery and household expenses had stretched into years. His presence had slowly transformed from helpful to controlling, eventually becoming a shadow that darkened every corner of their home. "It'll just be a little while longer," Elena would whisper to Sophia on the bad nights, when Roberto's anger filled the house like poison gas. "Just until we can save enough to move somewhere else." But somewhere else remained an elusive promise, always just out of reach, as Roberto's grip on their finances, their business, and their lives tightened. The emotional abuse was constant: criticism, isolation, controlling behavior. But recently, it had escalated. The bruises on Elena's wrists, the way she flinched when Roberto moved too quickly, told a story she tried desperately to hide from her daughter. What Elena didn't know was that Roberto's cruelty had extended to Sophia as well. Not physical, not yet, but the psychological torment of watching her mother suffer, coupled with Roberto's threats about what would happen if Sophia ever told anyone their family business, had created a prison of fear around the 8-year-old. Until yesterday, Ms. Bennet had started a journaling project with her 3rd grade class, a safe space, she'd called it, where you can write anything you feel, anything you think, and nobody will judge you. Nobody will even read it unless you want them to. For Sophia, those words had been the key to a door she hadn't realized was locked. With trembling hands and tears blurring the lined paper, she had written the truth, all of it. Her uncle's rage, the way he hurt her mother, his threats, his control over every aspect of their lives. The fear that never went away, even at school, because going home was inevitable. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Miss Bennet hadn't meant to break her promise about the journals being private, but when she'd seen Sophia's notebook accidentally left open on her desk after class, the words, "I'm afraid he's going to kill my mum someday," had leaped from the page like a scream for help. The teacher had done what any responsible adult would do, reported what she'd found to the proper authorities. Now, Sophia stood frozen in the school hallway, her entire body trembling at the sight of her uncle's truck. "I can't go out there," she whispered. "Please don't make me." The counselor's arm tightened around Sophia's shoulders. "You're not going anywhere with him, sweetie. The police are here to make sure of that. The lady in the suit is Ms. Parker from Child Protective Services. They're here to help." "You don't understand," Sophia insisted, her voice rising with panic. "He always gets his way, always. Nobody ever stops him." Before the counselor could respond, the school's front doors swung open, and Roberto Martinez strode in. Even from a distance, Sophia could see the rage barely contained behind his public face, the tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, the rigid set of his shoulders beneath his carefully pressed shirt. "There's my girl," he called, his voice carrying the false warmth he used around teachers and neighbors. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding. I'm here to take Sophia home." The police officer stepped forward, positioning himself between Roberto and the hallway where Sophia stood. "Mr. Martinez, we need you to come with us down to the station. We have some questions regarding allegations that have been made." Roberto's facade cracked slightly, his smile freezing in place. "Allegations? What allegations? Who's been telling lies about me?" His eyes found Sophia over the officer's shoulder, and even at a distance she could feel the weight of his silent threat. "Sir, please come with us voluntarily," the officer continued, his hand resting casually near his belt. "We can discuss everything at the station." For a moment, it seemed Roberto might comply. Then his gaze shifted to the parking lot behind him, where Elena Martinez had just pulled up in her old blue sedan. Sophia watched through the glass doors as her mother emerged, confusion and fear written across her face as she took in the scene. Police cars, her brother-in-law surrounded by officers, her daughter's small form huddled in the school hallway. Something in Roberto's expression changed. The mask slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You have no right to keep me from my family. Elena, tell them this is nonsense." As Elena approached, uncertainty evident in every step, Sophia felt a surge of desperation. This was the moment, the pivot point. If her mother defended Roberto, as she had so many times before out of fear and misplaced loyalty, everything Sophia had risked by telling the truth would be for nothing. "Mom!" Sophia called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "Please don't let him take us home. Please tell them the truth." Elena Martinez stopped halfway up the school steps, caught between her daughter's plea and her brother-in-law's commanding stare. For 3 years she had hidden the truth, from neighbors, from teachers, from everyone who might have helped. She had convinced herself she was protecting Sophia by keeping their family intact, by not risking Roberto's wrath. But seeing her daughter now, small and frightened, yet somehow braver than Elena had managed to be, something broke open inside her. Like a dam collapsing under too much pressure, the fear that had held her silent gave way to the stronger current of maternal protection. "My daughter is telling the truth," Elena said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Roberto has been hurting us, controlling us. It's been getting worse. I've been afraid to leave because he threatened to take Sophia if I ever tried to get away from him. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep?" Roberto's face contorted with fury. "You ungrateful!" He lunged forward, only to be immediately restrained by the police officers, who had clearly been prepared for this possibility. As they handcuffed him, Roberto's public persona evaporated entirely. "This isn't over," he snarled, struggling against the restraints. "You think some piece of paper will protect you? You think these cops will be around forever? I'll find you both. You know I will." Sophia buried her face in the counselor's side, unable to watch as they led her uncle toward the police car. His threats continued, growing more specific and frightening until the car door finally cut off his voice. Even then, his eyes never left Sophia and Elena, his stare burning with a promise of retribution. Ms. Parker from Child Protective Services approached Elena and Sophia once Roberto had been taken away. "We need to discuss safety plans," she explained gently. "Mr. Martinez will likely be released on bail pending investigation. A restraining order will be issued, but I won't lie to you. Paper protection is limited." "He'll come after us," Elena said, voicing what Sophia had already realized. "Once he's out, he won't stop until he finds us. We can place you in a temporary shelter." "Ms. Parker began, but Elena was already shaking her head. "He knows every shelter in the county. He's made donations to all of them for tax purposes. He has friends in the sheriff's department, in the courthouse. Not everyone, but enough that he'll find us." The CPS worker's expression revealed the uncomfortable truth. The system had limitations. They could offer temporary protection, emergency housing, legal orders that existed on paper. But a determined abuser with local connections and resources could often navigate around these obstacles, especially in a small town where everyone knew everyone. "We have nowhere to go," Elena admitted, defeat heavy in her voice. "No family outside of Roberto, no money of my own. He made sure of that. The bakery's in his name now. Everything is." As the adults continued discussing increasingly limited options, Sophia noticed a man watching them from across the parking lot. He sat astride a massive motorcycle, his leather vest covered in patches, his beard and tattooed arms giving him a fearsome appearance. But it was his eyes that caught Sophia's attention, intent, concerned, clearly listening to their conversation despite the distance. The man seemed to make a decision. He pulled out his phone, made a brief call, then approached the group. The police officers still on scene straightened, hands moving instinctively toward their weapons. "Ma'am," the man addressed Elena, keeping a respectful distance, "my name is Jack Ryder. I couldn't help overhearing your situation." "And what business is it of yours?" Ms. Parker asked sharply, stepping slightly in front of Elena and Sophia. "I'm president of the Iron Guardians Motorcycle Club," Jack explained, his deep voice calm despite the tension surrounding him. "We have a program specifically for situations like this. Protection for families escaping abuse when the system can't provide adequate safety." He held out a business card, which Ms. Parker reluctantly accepted. "We work with domestic violence shelters across 3 states. We provide security, safe transport, and temporary housing through our network. All verified, all legal." Ms. Parker studied the card with obvious skepticism. A motorcycle club, protecting abuse victims? "Many of us grew up in homes with domestic violence," Jack said simply. "We understand what's at stake, and we have resources that aren't limited by jurisdictional boundaries or bureaucratic red tape. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments." Elena looked at the imposing figure before her, leather, tattoos, the very image of someone she would normally cross the street to avoid. Then she looked at her daughter, who had been brave enough to tell the truth when Elena herself had been too afraid. She thought of Roberto's threats, the certainty of his vengeance once he was released. "How does it work?" she asked, ignoring Ms. Parker's warning glance. "We can move you tonight," Jack explained, "to a safe house outside county lines. We'll provide security until more permanent arrangements can be made. No cost, no obligations." "Why would you help us?" Elena asked, the suspicion clear in her voice. "You don't even know us." Jack's weathered face softened slightly as his gaze moved to Sophia. "Because that little girl was brave enough to tell the truth, and nobody should have to face the consequences of that courage alone." 24 hours later, Elena and Sofia Martinez sat in the back room of a roadside diner 50 miles from Riverdale. The Iron Guardians had moved quickly once Elena had made the difficult decision to accept their help. While she and Sofia had given formal statements to the police, Jack had activated what he called their extraction protocol. By nightfall, a female member of the club named Rachel had arrived at the motel where CPS had temporarily placed them. With Ms. Parker's reluctant blessing, after numerous phone calls to verify the Iron Guardians' credentials with domestic violence organizations, Rachel had escorted them to a nondescript van with tinted windows. "The first rule of staying hidden," Rachel had explained, "is to become completely unmemorable. No personal vehicles that can be recognized, no credit card trails, no cell phones that can be tracked." Now, as Sofia colored quietly in a children's menu, Elena tried to process everything that had happened. Roberto had indeed been released on bail by morning, just as Ms. Parker had warned. The restraining order had been issued, but Elena had no illusions about its effectiveness. Roberto wasn't just her abuser. He was a respected businessman in Riverdale, a major donor to the Police Benevolent Fund, and cousin to a county judge. His resources and connections far outweighed the protection offered by a piece of paper. The door to the diner's back room opened, and Jack entered, accompanied by 3 other members of the Iron Guardians. Elena had learned they all used road names when on protection detail. Jack was Hawk. The woman who had escorted them was Ivy, and the others introduced themselves as Doc, Diesel, and Liberty. "Roberto is looking for you," Hawk reported without preamble. "He's got friends in the sheriff's department running your plates, checking credit card activity. He's offering cash rewards for information on your whereabouts." Elena's heart sank. "How do you know all this?" "We have our own network," Hawk explained. "People who keep us informed. The important thing is that we stay ahead of him." "Where are we going?" Elena asked, glancing at Sofia, who was pretending not to listen to the adults' conversation. "We have a safe house in Mountain Ridge," Liberty answered. She was a striking woman in her 50s, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a braid that hung down her leather vest. "It's about 3 hours from here, in a different jurisdiction, completely off the grid, no paper trail connecting it to any of our members." "How long will we have to stay hidden?" Elena asked the question that had been weighing on her since they fled Riverdale. The bikers exchanged glances. It was Doc who finally answered, his gentle voice contrasting with his imposing physical presence. "That depends on the legal process. Your brother-in-law is facing serious charges, but with his connections, he might not face any real consequences," Elena finished for him. "I've seen it happen before in Riverdale. People with money and influence, they have different rules." "That's why we exist," Hawk said simply, "because sometimes the system fails those who need it most." If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? As they prepared to depart for the safe house, Sofia approached Hawk, her coloring page clutched in one small hand. "I drew this for you," she said shyly, holding out the paper. Hawk knelt down to accept the drawing, a crude but recognizable motorcycle surrounded by figures wearing what appeared to be capes. "It's you and your friends," Sofia explained. "I gave you superhero capes because that's what you are." Didis, the hardened biker's expression softened as he carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into his vest pocket. "Thank you, Sofia. But you're the real hero here. You told the truth when it was the hardest thing to do. That takes more courage than anything we're doing." The journey to Mountain Ridge took place under cover of darkness, with a security protocol that impressed even Eleanor, who had watched enough crime shows to understand the basics of evasion. The Iron Guardians traveled in a convoy, 2 motorcycles in front of the unmarked van, carrying Elena and Sofia, 2 behind, with regular changes in position and periodic route adjustments to ensure they weren't being followed. "We've been doing this for 11 years, Ivy explained as she drove the van, her eyes constantly checking the mirrors. "Started with just 3 of us helping a club member's sister escape an abusive husband. Now we have chapters in 7 states, all trained in extraction and protection protocols. How many families have you helped? Elena asked. 217, Ivy replied without hesitation. Not all domestic violence cases. Some witnesses in criminal cases who needed protection the authorities couldn't provide. Some children being stalked by non-custodial parents. Anyone who falls through the cracks of the official system. The safe house in Mountain Ridge turned out to be a modest cabin nestled among pine trees, its exterior deliberately weathered to blend with the surrounding vacation homes. Inside, however, it was equipped with modern security features, reinforced doors, window sensors and surveillance cameras that fed to monitors in a small office off the main living area. We'll have members on the property at all times, Hawk explained as he showed them around. Rotating shifts, different vehicles coming and going to avoid establishing patterns. The nearest neighbor is half a mile away, and they're part of our support network. Retired military, aware of the house's purpose. For Sophia, the cabin was a revelation, a space without fear for the first time in years. There were children's books on the shelves, games in the closet, even a small collection of stuffed animals on the bed in what would be her room. Someone had clearly prepared for a child's arrival, considering comforts beyond mere security. We try to make it feel like a vacation, especially for the kids, Liberty explained when she saw Sophia's surprised expression. Being in protective hiding is scary enough without it feeling like a prison. As the Iron Guardians settled into their security routine around the property, Elena found herself watching them with growing curiosity. These people, with their tattoos, leather and rough exteriors, defied every stereotype she had unconsciously harbored. They moved with military precision when implementing security protocols, yet showed unexpected gentleness when interacting with Sophia. "Why do you do this?" she finally asked Hawk as they sat on the cabin's porch that first evening, Sophia already asleep inside. "It must be dangerous, standing against men like Roberto. Men with power and resources and nothing to lose." Hawk was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the darkened forest surrounding them. "Everyone in the Iron Guardians has their own reason," he finally said. "For me, it was my mother. She tried to leave my father 7 times when I was a kid. Each time the system failed her, inadequate protection, financial dependency, his connections in our small town. The last time she tried, I was 16. He found us at my aunt's house." He paused, the memory clearly still painful decades later. "She didn't survive. I did." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Elena absorbed this in silence, understanding now the personal mission that drove the Iron Guardians. "I'm sorry," she finally said, "about your mother." "It was 30 years ago," Hawk replied. "But every time we help someone escape, every family we protect, it honors her memory, turns that tragedy into something meaningful." Over the next few days, Elena and Sophia settled into a new rhythm of life at the safe house. During the day, Liberty homeschooled Sophia, using materials provided by Sophia's teacher in Riverdale, who had been sworn to secrecy about their whereabouts. In the evenings, members of the Iron Guardians would sometimes join them for meals, creating an atmosphere of extended family that helped ease the isolation of hiding. Meanwhile, the legal process continued in Riverdale. Elena participated in court proceedings via secured video conferences, providing testimony about Roberto's abuse while being spared the trauma of facing him in person. Sophia's journal, along with her teacher's testimony, formed crucial evidence in building the case against Roberto. But as the Iron Guardians had feared, Roberto's influence in Riverdale began to manifest in troubling ways. Key evidence disappeared from police custody. Witnesses changed their stories. The prosecutor, initially passionate about the case, began suggesting plea deals for reduced charges. "He's working the system," Diesel reported grimly after returning from a reconnaissance trip to Riverdale. "Using his connections, applying pressure where he can." The restraining order violation charges were dismissed yesterday on a technicality. "What does that mean for us?" Elena asked. though she already suspected the answer. "It means we need to consider longer-term solutions," Hawke said carefully. "The legal system may not provide the protection you need, even if he's convicted. Men like Roberto, they don't just give up." The reality of their situation settled over Elena like a heavy blanket. She might have escaped Roberto physically, but the shadow of his influence and determination still threatened her and Sophia's future. They couldn't hide in safe houses forever. Sophia deserved a normal life. School, friends, the freedom to play outside without security protocols. As Elena wrestled with these thoughts, events in Riverdale took an unexpected turn. Roberto, growing increasingly frustrated with the legal proceedings and his inability to locate Elena and Sophia, made a critical mistake. He approached an Iron Guardian named Axel, who had been deliberately establishing himself as a potential informant. "He offered me $20,000 for information on your location," Axel reported during an emergency meeting at the safe house. "He was careless, openly discussed his plans for retaliation once he found you. I was wearing a wire with full knowledge of the FBI task force on domestic terrorism." "The FBI?" Elena asked, confused. "How did they get involved?" "When Roberto's threats escalated to include crossing state lines to commit violence, it became a federal case," Hawke explained. "We've been coordinating with them for the past week." For the first time since fleeing Riverdale, Elena felt a glimmer of genuine hope. Federal charges carried heavier penalties and would remove the case from the sphere of Roberto's local influence. Still, she had learned the hard way not to trust in easy solutions. "Even if he goes to prison," she said quietly, "he'll get out eventually, and he'll still come looking for us." "That's why we need to talk about Phase 2, Hawke said, his expression serious. "Immediate protection is only the first step. Real freedom means building a life where you're not just hiding, you're truly safe, even if he eventually finds out where you are. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep?" The next morning, Sophia found Hawke sitting on the cabin's front steps, cleaning parts from one of the security cameras. She sat beside him, watching his methodical movements with curious eyes. "Are we going to have to hide forever?" she asked suddenly. Hawke set down the equipment, giving the child his full attention. "No, Sophia, not forever." "But Uncle Roberto won't stop looking for us," she persisted. "I heard Mom crying last night. She's scared." "Your mom is very brave," Hawke corrected gently. "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. It just means the thing you're doing matters enough to be scary." Sophia considered this, drawing patterns in the dirt with a stick. "Like telling the truth in my journal?" "Exactly like that," Hawke agreed. "That was one of the bravest things I've ever seen anyone do. But now, we had to leave our home. Mom had to leave the bakery. It's all my fault." Hawke shook his head firmly. "None of this is your fault, Sophia. The only person responsible is your uncle. He made his choices. You just told the truth." "But what happens now? Mom says we can't go back to Riverdale." Hawke hesitated, clearly weighing how much to share with the 8-year-old. "We're working on a plan," he said finally. "A way for you and your mom to have a new home, somewhere safe, where you can go to school and make friends, and not have to look over your shoulder all the time." "With the Iron Guardians?" Sophia asked hopefully. "With friends of ours," Hawke confirmed. "People who understand what you've been through, who know how to help families like yours build new lives." Later that day, as Sophia napped after her lessons, Elena met with the core protection team of Iron Guardians to discuss what Hawke had cryptically referred to as Phase 2. "We call it the Phoenix Program," Liberty explained, spreading a map across the kitchen table, "for families who need to completely rebuild their lives away from their abusers. We have a network of communities across the country," Doc continued. "Small towns where we have strong connections, local law enforcement, school administrators, business owners who understand the situation and provide additional layers of security and support." Hawke pointed to several locations marked on the map. "Each of these communities has successfully integrated families like yours, new identities, employment, housing, educational support for the children." A fresh start with built-in protection. Elena stared at the map, the reality of what they were suggesting slowly sinking in. You're talking about us completely disappearing. New names, new everything. It would be your choice, Ivy assured her. Some families opt for modified solutions, keeping their names but relocating to communities where we have strong support networks. Others choose full identity changes, especially in cases with persistent, resourceful abusers. How many times have you done this? Elena asked. The full Phoenix program. 73 families over the past decade, Hawk answered. Everyone still safe, with success defined as the abuser never locating them. Elena's mind reeled with the implications. Abandoning the bakery her parents had built, leaving behind the community where her family had lived for generations. Starting over completely, with Sophia growing up under a different name. I need time to think, she said finally. This isn't just about running away from Roberto. It's about who we become after. Take all the time you need, Hawk said, understanding in his voice. This has to be your decision. We're just here to make it possible, whatever you choose. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. That night, as Elena tucked Sophia into bed, her daughter asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her young mind. Mom, if we get a new name, will I still be me inside? Elena sat on the edge of the bed, stroking Sophia's hair. Of course you will, Mija. Names are just what people call us. Who we are, that's in here. She touched her daughter's heart gently. Would Dad still be able to find us in heaven, if we have new names? The innocent question brought tears to Elena's eyes. Your father would find you anywhere, Sophia. His love isn't tied to what name you use. As Sophia drifted to sleep, Elena remained beside her, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her daughter's chest. The decision before them felt impossible, staying connected to their past versus ensuring their future safety. Either way, something precious would be lost. Her contemplation was interrupted by the sound of motorcycles approaching, more than the usual security detail. Elena moved quietly to the window, where she saw a convoy of at least 20 bikes pulling up to the cabin. Hawk emerged from the security office, greeting the newcomers with the formal handshakes she had come to recognize as part of the club's protocol. Curious, Elena stepped onto the porch. The riders were removing their helmets, revealing a surprising detail. Nearly half were women, their leather vests bearing the same Iron Guardian's insignia as the men's. What's happening? She asked as Hawk approached. Reinforcements, he explained. We received intelligence that Roberto has hired private investigators to search for you. They've been showing your pictures in towns within a 100-mile radius of Riverdale. Eleanor's blood ran cold. He's getting closer. We're staying ahead of him, Hawk assured her. But as a precaution, we've increased security and accelerated the timeline for your decision about the Phoenix program. Why? The new arrivals were efficiently establishing an expanded perimeter around the property, setting up additional surveillance equipment and organizing what appeared to be defensive positions. The military precision of their movements was both reassuring and terrifying. Protection, yes, but protection necessitated by imminent threat. How much time do we have? Elena asked. To make your decision? Ideally within 48 hours. If you choose the Phoenix program, we'll need to move you to a transitional location while the final arrangements are made. Eleanor watched the Iron Guardians working together in the gathering darkness, their headlamps creating pools of light among the trees. These strangers had put themselves between her family and danger without hesitation, creating a human shield around a frightened child who had simply told the truth. I need to speak with the whole group, she said suddenly, a decision crystallizing in her mind. Later that evening, with Sophia safely asleep, Eleanor addressed the assembled Iron Guardians in the cabin's main room. These were not just the core protection team she had come to know over the past week, but members from multiple chapters who had answered the call to defend her and Sophia. I want to understand exactly what happens in the Phoenix program, Elena began. Not just the logistics, but what it means for Sophia's future, for both of us. Liberty stepped forward. As Elena had learned, she was the primary architect of the Phoenix program, having escaped an abusive situation herself decades earlier. The Phoenix program has 3 components, Liberty explained: security, stability, and community. Security means not just physical protection during transition, but long-term measures to prevent your abuser from finding you. Stability means housing, employment, education, the practical foundations of a new life. Community means integration into a network of support that understands your situation and maintains vigilance without turning your life into a permanent state of hiding. And our identities, Elena pressed. Would we have to change our names legally? That depends on your specific risk assessment, Liberty answered honestly. In cases with persistent, resourceful abusers who have significant resources, like Roberto, we generally recommend full identity changes. New names, new documentation, new history. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? The reality of what this would mean settled heavily over Elena. Sophia would grow up not just away from Riverdale, but separated from her own history, from her father's memory, from the bakery that's been in our family for generations. Hawk stepped forward. There might be a third option we haven't fully explored. All eyes turned to him, including Elena's, hope flickering in her expression. Instead of you running and hiding forever, Hawk said carefully, what if we created enough pressure on Roberto that he's the one who needs to disappear? Murmurs rippled through the assembled bikers. This was clearly a deviation from their standard protocols. Explain, Elena requested, leaning forward. Roberto's power comes from his reputation, his business connections, his standing in the community, Hawk elaborated. What if we organized a campaign to systematically dismantle that power, not through illegal means, but through public pressure, exposure, economic leverage? A different kind of protection detail, one of the female riders suggested, understanding dawning in her expression. Not hiding the victims, but removing the abuser's ability to threaten them. It's never been our primary approach, Liberty cautioned. It carries different risks, different exposures. But it would mean Sophia doesn't have to lose her name, Eleanor said softly. Her connection to her father, to our family history. It would mean temporarily higher visibility, Hawk warned, standing your ground rather than disappearing. It would require a different kind of courage. Elena thought about Sophia's question earlier that evening, about whether her father would still be able to find her in heaven if they changed their names, about the bakery her parents had built from nothing, about the roots her family had established in Riverdale over generations. I'm tired of running, she said finally. Sophia was brave enough to tell the truth. Maybe it's time I found the same courage. The strategy session that followed continued late into the night. What emerged was unlike anything the Iron Guardians had attempted before, not an extraction and relocation, but a comprehensive campaign to neutralize Roberto's power and influence, while simultaneously building a public support network around Elena and Sophia that would make them too visible, too protected for Roberto to threaten. The first phase is information gathering, Doc explained, his background in intelligence apparent as he outlined the approach. We document every aspect of Roberto's business dealings, his community connections, his pressure points. Phase 2 is strategic exposure, continued a rider introduced as Echo, whose civilian job involved public relations. Carefully coordinated release of information to regulatory agencies, business partners, community organizations. Phase 3 is community mobilization, Hawk added. Creating a visible support network around you and Sophia that makes it impossible for Roberto to act without immediate consequences. And if that doesn't work? Elena asked, the practical question hanging heavy in the air. Then we revert to the Phoenix program, Hawk said honestly. But we'll have tried to preserve your lives and connections first. As the meeting concluded and the Iron Guardians returned to their security positions, Elena found herself standing on the cabin's porch with Hawk, looking out at the ring of protection surrounding them. "Why are you willing to try this different approach?" she asked. "It seems riskier for your people." Hawk was silent for a moment before answering. "When I lost my mother, I lost everything connected to her too. Our home, our history, even photographs. Running meant survival, but at a tremendous cost." He looked at Elena directly. "If there's a chance for Sophia to keep her connections to her father, to your family legacy, while still being safe, that's worth the extra risk to us." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The next morning, Elena explained the new plan to Sophia in terms the 8-year-old could understand. "Instead of us hiding forever, the Iron Guardians are going to help make Uncle Roberto stop being scary." Sophia's brow furrowed in concentration. "How can they do that? Uncle Roberto doesn't get scared of anything." "Everyone is afraid of something, Mija," Elena explained gently. "Your uncle is afraid of losing his reputation, his business, his friends thinking he's a bad person." "He is a bad person," Sophia stated with the simple clarity of childhood. "He hurts you." "Yes," Elena agreed. The admission still difficult after years of hiding the truth. "And now other people are going to know that too." The Iron Guardians' plan moved swiftly into action. Teams were dispatched back to Riverdale and surrounding communities with specific intelligence-gathering missions. Others began establishing connections with domestic violence advocacy groups, media contacts, and regulatory agencies that might have jurisdiction over Roberto's business interests. 3 days into this new strategy, the first breakthrough came. A member known as Cypher, whose civilian expertise was in financial investigation, returned with a comprehensive analysis of Roberto's business dealings. "He's been skimming from the bakery profits for years," Cypher reported, spreading documents across the table, "and using the business to launder money from less legitimate enterprises. There's evidence of tax fraud, insurance fraud, and potentially illegal loan operations." "Can we prove it?" Hawk asked, the crucial question in their strategy. "Enough for the IRS and state financial regulators to open investigations," Cypher confirmed. "Once they start looking, they'll find more than we could on our own." The first strategic exposure took place the following week. Anonymous tips with supporting documentation were simultaneously delivered to the Internal Revenue Service, the State Financial Regulatory Commission, and the Banking Oversight Board. Within days, Roberto's business accounts were frozen pending investigation. Meanwhile, another team of Iron Guardians had been working on community mobilization in Riverdale. Operating covertly at first, they identified key allies. The high school principal who had always distrusted Roberto, the newspaper editor who had suspected something wasn't right with the Martinez family situation, the Chamber of Commerce members who had experienced Roberto's unethical business practices firsthand. "The community narrative is shifting," reported Echo during a secure video conference. "Roberto's attempts to portray himself as the victim of false accusations aren't landing. Too many people had suspicions already. They just needed permission to voice them." The most powerful moment came when Ms. Bennett, Sophia's teacher, organized a public letter of support signed by every teacher in Riverdale Elementary School. The letter, published in the local newspaper, described Sophia as a brave truth-teller who should be honored, not hunted, and called on the community to stand with a child who had the courage to speak when adults remained silent. With each new development, Roberto's position in Riverdale deteriorated. The financial investigations uncovered more serious crimes than even Cypher had initially suspected. Former business associates, sensing the changing winds, came forward with additional allegations. The protective shield of influence and fear that had surrounded him began to crumble. Through it all, Elena and Sophia remained at the safe house, physically removed from the unfolding events, but constantly updated by the Iron Guardians. For Sophia, the experience had transformed from a frightening flight into something that began to feel like justice. "Are we winning?" she asked Hawk one evening as they played a board game on the cabin porch. "It's not exactly about winning or losing," Hawk explained, moving his game piece. "It's about changing the balance of power, making sure your uncle can't hurt you or your mom anymore. But he's the one in trouble now, not us, Sophia persisted. That feels like winning to me. But if you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? Hawk smiled, the expression softening his weathered face. You might be right, Sophia. It does feel a bit like winning. The turning point came 6 weeks after Sophia's journal entry had set everything in motion. Roberto, facing multiple criminal investigations and abandoned by his former allies, attempted to flee jurisdiction. Alert to this possibility, the Iron Guardians had maintained surveillance on his movements and immediately notified federal authorities, who arrested him at the state line. The additional charges of attempted flight made bail impossible. With Roberto securely in custody, awaiting trial on multiple federal charges, the immediate threat to Elena and Sophia had been neutralized. The question now was what came next. We have options, Hawk explained during a strategy meeting at the safe house. You could still enter the Phoenix program, new location, new identities, fresh start, or you could return to Riverdale, where the community is now mobilized to support you, or something in between. Elena looked to Sophia, who had been included in this particular discussion at her mother's insistence. What do you think, Mia? Do you want to go back to our town, or start somewhere new? Sophia considered the question with the seriousness only children can bring to important decisions. I want to go home, she said finally. To our house, my school, Grandma and Grandpa's bakery, but only if the Iron Guardians can still be our friends. Always, Hawk promised without hesitation. That's not even a question. The return to Riverdale was carefully orchestrated. Rather than Elena and Sophia slipping back into town quietly, the Iron Guardians organized what they called a homecoming procession, a show of force and solidarity that would make it clear to everyone in Riverdale that the Martinez family remained under their protection. 200 motorcycles escorted the vehicle carrying Elena and Sophia as they crossed the town limits. Riders from 7 states had responded to the call, creating a thunderous procession that drew every Riverdale resident onto porches and sidewalks to witness their arrival. At the Martinez family bakery, now released from the financial holds placed during the investigation into Roberto's crimes, the procession stopped. The crowd that had gathered included not just curious onlookers, but deliberate supporters, teachers from Sophia's school, neighbors who had brought welcome home signs, community members who had been silently complicit in their fear, but were now determined to make amends. As Elena and Sophia stepped from the vehicle, Miss Bennett pushed through the crowd, enveloping Sophia in a tearful hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. So proud. The Iron Guardians established a perimeter, not out of concern for immediate threat, but as a visual reminder of their continued presence in the Martinez family's life. Hawk stood beside Elena as she faced the gathered community, finding her voice after months of silence and fear. "We're home," she said simply, "because of a brave little girl who told the truth, and because of people who made sure that truth was protected." She gestured to the Iron Guardians surrounding them. "These people, who many of you might have crossed the street to avoid, stood up when our community failed us. They showed us that family isn't always blood, and protection can come from unexpected places." The integration back into Riverdale life was not without challenges. There were those who had been too close to Roberto, too complicit in his activities, to welcome Elena and Sophia's return. There were practical matters of reopening the bakery, re-establishing their lives, and processing the trauma of the past months. But unlike before, they did not face these challenges alone. The Iron Guardians maintained a continuous presence in Riverdale for the first month after their return. Rotating members staying in a rented house near the Martinez home, visible patrols past their property, riders accompanying Sophia to and from school. "We don't normally maintain such a long-term presence," Hawk explained when Elena expressed concern about the imposition. "But your case is unique. You've chosen to stand your ground rather than disappear. That requires a different kind of ongoing support. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. As summer arrived in Riverdale, the Iron Guardians' visible presence gradually reduced, shifting to what they called a sustainable security model. Members who lived within a reasonable distance incorporated regular visits into their routines. Others maintained connections through technology. Security systems installed at the bakery and home, emergency protocols established, regular check-ins. Roberto's trial was scheduled for fall, with both Elena and Sofia expected to testify. The evidence against him was overwhelming, making conviction all but certain, but the legal process remained a source of anxiety, particularly for Sofia, who would have to face her uncle in court. To help prepare her for this challenge, Liberty organized what the Iron Guardians called a courage circle, a gathering of other children who had testified against abusers, now grown and thriving, who could share their experiences and strategies. "I was 7 when I had to testify against my stepfather," shared a young woman named Casey, now a college student studying psychology. "I was so scared I could barely speak at first." "What helped you?" Sofia asked, her small hand clutching Elena's tightly. "I had a special stone in my pocket," Casey explained. "My advocate told me to squeeze it whenever I felt afraid, and remember that I was just telling the truth. The truth was already there. I was just letting it out into the world where it belonged." After the courage circle, Hawk presented Sofia with a small, polished stone embedded with a tiny Iron Guardian's emblem. "For your pocket when you testify," he explained. "So you remember you have an army behind you." Sofia clutched the stone, running her fingers over the smooth surface and the emblem etched into it. "I'm still scared," she admitted, "but not like before. Now it's just regular scared, not the kind that makes you feel sick inside." "That's progress," Hawk said with approval. "Courage isn't about not feeling afraid. It's about doing what's right even when you are afraid." Summer faded into autumn, and the day of Roberto's trial arrived. As promised, the Iron Guardians organized a massive show of support. Hundreds of riders from chapters across the country converged on the federal courthouse, creating a corridor of leather-clad protection through which Eleanor and Sofia walked to the building's entrance. Inside, strict court protocols limited the number of supporters who could be present, but strategic positioning ensured that wherever Elena and Sofia looked from the witness stand, they would see an Iron Guardian's face among the spectators. When Sofia's turn came to testify, she walked to the witness stand, clutching the stone Hawk had given her. The child-friendly procedures arranged by the prosecutor meant she didn't have to directly face Roberto, but his presence in the courtroom was still palpable, still intimidating. As she raised her right hand to be sworn in, Sofia's eyes found Hawk in the gallery. He gave her the slightest nod, not of instruction, but of absolute confidence. Beside him sat Liberty, Doc, Ivy, and others who had become like extended family over the past months. Behind them, visible through the courtroom windows, were rows of motorcycles and their riders, a silent army united by one purpose, to keep a frightened child safe because she told the truth. "Sofia," the prosecutor began gently, "can you tell the court about what you wrote in your journal that day in Ms. Bennett's class?" Sofia took a deep breath, her small fingers tightening around the stone in her palm. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, the voice of a child who knew beyond any doubt that she was not alone. "I wrote the truth," she said simply. "And then a whole army of bikers made sure nothing bad would happen to me because I told it." Roberto Martinez was sentenced to 27 years in federal prison. The combination of financial crimes, witness intimidation, domestic abuse, and attempted flight from prosecution had resulted in multiple consecutive sentences that ensured he would not be a threat to Elena and Sofia for decades to come. The courtroom had been packed for the sentencing hearing, with Iron Guardians occupying strategic positions throughout the gallery. When the judge announced the sentence, there was no cheering or visible celebration from the leather-clad supporters, just a collective exhalation of relief and the solemn nods of people who understood that justice, while necessary, didn't erase the trauma that had led to this moment. Outside the courthouse, however, the atmosphere shifted to one of subdued victory. Hundreds of motorcycles lined the street, their riders standing at attention as Elena and Sophia emerged into the autumn sunlight. Without any apparent signal, the bikers raised their right fists in a silent salute, not in triumph over a defeated enemy, but in recognition of a child's courage and a mother's resilience. "It's really over?" Sophia asked, looking up at Hawk, who stood beside them on the courthouse steps. "This part is over," Hawk confirmed. "Roberto can't hurt you anymore." Elena squeezed her daughter's hand. "We can go home and just be us again." But as they prepared to leave the courthouse, a reporter approached with a microphone and camera crew. Elena's instinct was to shield Sophia from further exposure, but the reporter addressed Hawk rather than them. "Mr. Ryder, can you tell us about the Iron Guardian's involvement in this case? This is the most visible example of your organization's work we've seen." Hawk considered the question carefully. The Iron Guardians typically avoided media attention, preferring to operate below the radar. But the Martinez case had inevitably thrust them into the public eye, creating an opportunity they had not anticipated. "We stand with those the system sometimes fails," he said finally. "In this case, a brave child told the truth about abuse, and we made sure she and her mother were safe while that truth was heard." "Is this typical of your motorcycle club's activities?" the reporter pressed. "Most people associate bikers with a different kind of reputation. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep?" Hawk smiled slightly. "Maybe it's time for that reputation to evolve. The Iron Guardians have been providing protection for abuse victims, witnesses, and endangered families for over a decade. We just don't usually issue press releases about it." The reporter turned to Elena. "Ms. Martinez, how does it feel to have had this unusual source of support?" Elena looked at the assembled bikers, then down at Sophia, who was still clutching the stone Hawk had given her for courage. "When the systems that should have protected us failed, these people became our shield," she said. "They didn't just keep us physically safe. They showed Sophia that telling the truth, even when it's frightening, even when there are consequences, is always worth doing, because good people will stand with you." That evening, as Riverdale absorbed the news of Roberto's sentencing, the Martinez family bakery became the site of an impromptu celebration. Iron Guardians mingled with townspeople who had rallied around Elena and Sophia during the trial. Miss Bennett and other teachers chatted with leather-clad bikers, finding unexpected common ground in their commitment to protecting children. In a quiet corner of the bakery, Liberty sat with Elena, watching the unusual gathering with evident satisfaction. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "With the Iron Guardians, I mean. Do you just ride away into the sunset?" Liberty laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "It's not quite that dramatic. We'll maintain a presence in Riverdale for a while longer, less visible than before, but still watchful. Some members have actually decided to relocate to this area permanently." "Because of us?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "Partially," Liberty acknowledged, "but also because what happened here, the community transformation, the public support network, it's a model we want to develop further. Most of our work has involved extracting families from dangerous situations. Your case showed us another possibility, changing the environment instead of removing the family from it." Across the room, Sophia was showing her special stone to a group of younger Iron Guardians, explaining its significance with the solemn importance only an 8-year-old can convey. Among them was a young woman named Tara, recently patched into the club, who listened with particular attention. "Tara came through our program 10 years ago, Liberty explained, following Elena's gaze. "She was Sophia's age when we helped her family escape an abusive situation. Now she's part of the next generation of guardians. It comes full circle, Elena observed. The best kind of healing often does. Liberty agreed. As winter settled over Riverdale, the visible presence of the Iron Guardians gradually decreased as promised. The motorcycles that had become a common sight outside the Martinez bakery were less frequently parked there. The riders who had escorted Sophia to school each morning transitioned to occasional check-ins, but the connection remained. Hawk called weekly, his gruff voice becoming a reassuring constant in their lives. Liberty organized monthly support group meetings for families who had experienced domestic violence, creating a community resource that extended beyond the Martinez case. Doc established a scholarship fund for Sophia's future education, funded by Iron Guardian chapters across the country. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. For Sophia, the transition back to normal life brought both relief and occasional anxiety. The nightmares that had plagued her immediately after Roberto's arrest gradually subsided. But certain triggers, a black truck similar to his, the sound of someone raising their voice in anger, could still provoke moments of panic. To help her develop coping strategies, the Iron Guardians connected Elena with a child psychologist specializing in trauma recovery. Dr. Winslow used a therapy approach that incorporated Sophia's existing support system, including regular sessions where Hawk or other Iron Guardians, whom Sophia trusted, participated in therapeutic activities. The relationships she's formed with the Iron Guardians are actually quite healing, Dr. Winslow explained to Elena after one such session. They represent absolute safety to her, the people who came when she was in danger and never left until the danger was gone. That's a powerful counter-narrative to the betrayal trauma she experienced with her uncle. The bakery thrived under Elena's renewed management. With Roberto's financial malfeasance exposed, the business records had been untangled, revealing that the family enterprise was actually far more profitable than Elena had been led to believe. Years of believing they were barely staying afloat had been another of Roberto's manipulations, a way to maintain control by manufacturing financial dependency. As spring approached, Elena began planning a special event, a community appreciation day to thank Riverdale for the support that had ultimately helped bring Roberto to justice. The bakery would offer free treats, local musicians would perform, and the Iron Guardians would be honored guests. "It's not enough," Elena told Hawk when discussing the plans. "A party doesn't begin to repay what you've all done for us." "We don't do this work for repayment," Hawk reminded her. "But the event serves another purpose. It continues to strengthen the community bonds that will help protect Sophia and other vulnerable children in Riverdale long after we're less directly involved." The Appreciation Day dawned clear and warm. Perfect weather for the outdoor celebration that had expanded far beyond Eleanor's initial vision. The street in front of the bakery had been closed to traffic, with tables and chairs set up for community members to enjoy the food and music. Children ran and played, their laughter a healing sound after the tensions of the past year. Motorcycles began arriving mid-morning. Not just the Iron Guardians, who had been directly involved in the Martinez case, but riders from chapters across the country who had heard their story. They came not in intimidating formation, but as welcomed guests, parking their bikes at the edges of the gathering and integrating seamlessly into the celebration. By noon, the street was filled with an unlikely mix of small-town families and leather-clad bikers, sharing food and conversation as if such gatherings happened every weekend in Riverdale. Children approached the motorcycles with curious excitement, encouraged rather than warned away by parents who had come to associate these machines and their riders with protection rather than threat. Sophia moved through the crowd with newfound confidence, proudly introducing her school friends to the Iron Guardians she had come to consider extended family. The stone Hawk had given her was now worn as a pendant, transformed by one of the club's more artistic members into a piece of jewelry that served as both memory and talisman. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? In the afternoon, the mayor of Riverdale, who had been notably absent during the early days of the case but had eventually joined the community support network, called for everyone's attention. A small stage had been set up near the bakery entrance, with a microphone and speakers for the local musicians who had been performing throughout the day. "Today we celebrate not just the courage of one family," the mayor began, "but the extraordinary alliance that formed to protect them. Riverdale has always prided itself on being a close community, but last year we were reminded that community sometimes extends beyond traditional boundaries." Elena and Sophia were invited onto the stage, followed by Hawk as representative of the Iron Guardians. The mayor presented them with a proclamation officially recognizing their contributions to the town's welfare. "In honor of Sofia Martinez's courage in telling the truth," the mayor read from the document, "and in recognition of the Iron Guardians' dedication to protecting those in danger, the town of Riverdale hereby proclaims April 15th as Courage and Protection Day. And furthermore, the town council has unanimously approved the establishment of a dedicated safe house for families escaping domestic violence to be operated in partnership with the Iron Guardians Protection Program." The announcement brought a roar of approval from the gathered crowd. The establishment of a safe house in Riverdale, a town that had previously ignored or minimized domestic violence, represented a transformation far beyond what Elena or the Iron Guardians had initially imagined possible. As the celebration continued into the evening, Hawk found a quiet moment to speak with Sophia, who had climbed onto a low wall to watch a group of Iron Guardians teaching younger children about motorcycle safety. "How are you doing, brave one?" he asked, using the nickname that had stuck since the trial. Sophia considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I'm good," she said finally. "Not scared anymore. Not most days, anyway." "That's progress," Hawk approved. "Fear has its place. It warns us of danger, but it shouldn't rule our lives." "Do you ever get scared?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious. Hawk nodded without hesitation. "All the time. Every new family we protect, every situation we enter, there's always fear. The trick is to acknowledge it, then act anyway." Sophia fingered her pendant thoughtfully. "Like telling the truth even when it's scary." "Exactly like that," Hawk agreed. As darkness fell over Riverdale, the celebration took on a different character. Lights strung between the trees illuminated the gathering. The music shifted from upbeat daytime performances to more reflective evening melodies. Families with younger children began to depart, while others settled in for the nighttime phase of the event. Elena found herself sitting at a table with Liberty, Doc, and several other Iron Guardians who had been central to her and Sophia's protection. The easy camaraderie that had developed between them over the past year made the conversation flow naturally, punctuated by occasional laughter and comfortable silences. "I've been thinking about the future," Elena said during one such pause. "About how to make what you did for us available to others in similar situations." "The safe house is a start," Liberty noted. "Having a local resource will make early intervention possible for families in Riverdale." "But it's bigger than just this town," Elena persisted. "What happened here? It could be a template for other communities, couldn't it? The partnership between local resources and the Iron Guardians' protection capabilities." The bikers exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. It was Doc who finally answered. "We've been discussing something similar. The Martinez model, we've been calling it. A hybrid approach that doesn't rely solely on extraction and relocation, but incorporates community transformation and public support networks." "I want to be part of it," Elena said firmly. "Not just as someone you helped, but as an active participant. I have skills, business management, community organization, and I have perspective as someone who's been through it. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The following months saw the Martinez model evolve from concept to structured program. The Iron Guardians established a formal non-profit organization separate from but affiliated with the motorcycle club, allowing them to receive grants and donations for their protection work without compromising the club's independence. Elena joined the board of this new organization, bringing her business acumen and personal experience to the development of protocols for community-based protection strategies. Her involvement transformed her own healing process, channeling the trauma she had experienced into creating solutions for others facing similar dangers. Sophia, too, found her own path forward. With Elena's encouragement and Dr. Winslow's therapeutic support, she began speaking to other children about the importance of telling trusted adults when they felt unsafe. Her simple message, "The truth is scary sometimes, but it's how help finds you," resonated with children and educators alike. The Safe House in Riverdale opened in late summer, a renovated property on the edge of town that combined security features with home-like comfort. Iron Guardians provided training for local volunteers in protection protocols, while community members contributed practical support: meals, clothing, transportation for children to continue school without disruption. "This is what healing looks like," Liberty observed during the Safe House dedication ceremony. "Not just recovering from trauma, but transforming it into something that helps others." As the one-year anniversary of Roberto's sentencing approached, Elena received an unexpected call from the federal prosecutor who had handled their case. "We've identified at least 7 other families who experienced similar abuse and financial control from Roberto," the prosecutor explained. "They've been hesitant to come forward, but seeing the outcome of your case and the community support that developed around you and Sophia has encouraged them. Would you be willing to meet with them?" This new dimension of Roberto's crimes was painful to absorb, but Elena agreed without hesitation. The meeting was arranged at the Safe House, neutral territory where the families would feel protected as they shared their stories. The gathering was both heartbreaking and healing. Women and children who had suffered in isolation discovered they were not alone, that their experiences followed patterns of manipulation and control that validated their individual realities. With the Iron Guardians providing security outside and Elena facilitating the conversation inside, a new support network began to form among those Roberto had victimized. "He made all of us believe we were alone," one woman observed tearfully. "That no one would believe us if we told. That we were somehow responsible for his actions. The isolation is part of the abuse," Elena confirmed. "Breaking that isolation, connecting with others who understand, with resources that can help, that's the first step toward freedom." As fall colors transformed Riverdale once again, the town prepared for the first official observance of Courage and Protection Day. What had begun as Elena's small gesture of gratitude had evolved into an annual tradition celebrating the partnership between the Iron Guardians and the community. Motorcycles began arriving days before the event. Hundreds of riders from chapters nationwide who had been inspired by the Martinez case to develop similar protection programs in their own communities. They came not just to participate in the celebration, but to share knowledge, strategies, and resources with one another. Hawk, who had maintained regular contact with Elena and Sophia throughout the year, arrived with news of the broader impact their case had created. 23 communities have now implemented some version of the Martinez model, he reported during a planning meeting at the bakery. Domestic violence reports are up 30% in those areas, not because incidents have increased, but because victims feel safer coming forward when they know protection is available. Or if you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? The day before the official celebration, a special ceremony took place at the Iron Guardians' temporary headquarters, a rented barn on the outskirts of town that had become their base of operations when visiting Riverdale. Unlike the public events planned for the following day, this gathering was private, attended only by club members and specially invited guests. Elena and Sophia arrived to find the barn transformed. The Iron Guardian's insignia, a stylized helmet with protective wings, dominated one wall. Rows of motorcycles gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through the open doors. Members stood in formal formation, their leather vests immaculate, creating an atmosphere of ritual and significance. "What's happening?" Elena whispered to Liberty, who had escorted them inside. "A recognition ceremony," Liberty explained. "Very rare in our world. The national leadership is here." At the front of the gathering stood Hawk, alongside an older man introduced as Thunder, the national president of the Iron Guardians. Their expressions were solemn as they called Elena and Sophia forward. "1 year ago," Thunder began, his deep voice carrying throughout the space, "a child told the truth at great personal risk. That truth set in motion a series of events that not only saved her and her mother, but transformed how the Iron Guardians fulfill our protection mission." He gestured to a covered object on a table beside him. "For 50 years, the Iron Guardians have operated largely in the shadows, providing protection without recognition or acknowledgement. The Martinez case showed us another path, one where public alliance and community transformation create a different kind of safety." With ceremonial gravity, Thunder removed the covering to reveal 2 leather vests, one adult-sized, one child-sized, bearing a variation of the Iron Guardian's insignia. "These are Guardian Ally vests," he explained, "created specifically to honor those who have demonstrated exceptional courage and who work alongside us without riding with us. Elena and Sophia Martinez, you are the first to receive this recognition in the 50-year history of our organization." As Hawk and Thunder presented the vests, the assembled Iron Guardians raised their right fists in the salute Elena had come to recognize as their highest sign of respect. The moment carried a weight of history and tradition that transcended the leather and patches. It represented a profound evolution in how this community of outsiders engaged with the wider world. "The vests symbolize a permanent alliance," Hawk explained, as he helped Sophia with hers, which fit perfectly over her favorite purple sweater. "No matter where life takes you, the Iron Guardians will consider you under our protection, always." The public celebration the following day exceeded even the previous year's gathering. Riverdale's main street was closed to accommodate the crowds. Local families, Iron Guardians from across the country, media representatives, and delegations from other communities interested in implementing the Martinez model. Elena and Sophia, wearing their Guardian Ally vests, were no longer just honored guests, but active participants in the ceremonies. They stood alongside Hawk and other Iron Guardians' leadership as the mayor officially dedicated the safe house, now named Sophia's Haven, in recognition of the child whose courage had initiated the town's transformation. Ms. Bennett, who had been instrumental in bringing Sophia's journal entry to light, received special recognition for her role in the case. "As educators, we are on the front lines of child protection," she said when accepting the award. "Sophia taught me that sometimes keeping a promise is less important than keeping a child safe." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The most meaningful moment for Sophia came later in the day, when she was invited to lead a Truth Tellers parade through town. A procession of children carrying handmade signs celebrating courage, honesty, and speaking up when something is wrong. Riding on the back of Hawk's stationary motorcycle, positioned at the front of the parade, Sophia beamed with pride as hundreds of children followed behind her. "Look at you," Elena said when the parade concluded back at the town square. "My brave girl, leading the way for others." "I was just the first," Sophia said with wisdom beyond her years. "Now everyone knows it's okay to tell the truth, even when it's scary." As evening approached, Elena found a moment alone with Hawk, watching the celebration from the steps of the bakery. "I never imagined this," she said, gesturing to the transformed town around them. "When I was living in fear, When Roberto controlled everything, I couldn't have dreamed of this reality. That's how abusers maintain control, Hawk observed. They make you believe nothing can change, that there's no way out. Breaking that illusion is sometimes the hardest part. The Iron Guardians broke it for us, Elena acknowledged. You showed up when no one else would or could. Hawk shook his head slightly. We provided the means, but the courage was always yours and Sophia's. You both chose to stand and fight rather than disappear. That's what transformed Riverdale, not just our presence, but your willingness to reclaim your place in this community. As darkness fell, the Iron Guardians organized what they called a light ceremony. Hundreds of motorcycles positioned in formation around the town square, their headlights illuminating the gathering at precisely the same moment. The synchronized light show created a powerful visual metaphor for the protection they offered. Darkness pushed back by collective action, safety created through unity of purpose. Standing in that circle of light with Sophia beside her, Elena felt the full measure of the journey they had taken. From isolation and fear to community and strength. From hiding the truth to celebrating it. From vulnerability to protection. Mom, Sophia whispered, tugging at Elena's hand. Do you think other kids will tell the truth now if someone is hurting them? I hope so, sweetheart, Elena replied, kneeling to her daughter's level. That's why we're doing all this. So they know what can happen when they speak up, that an army might show up to keep them safe, just like it did for you. The Iron Guardians maintained their connection to Riverdale long after the second annual Courage and Protection Day concluded. The chapter that had formed specifically around the Martinez case established permanent roots in the community, with several members relocating to the area and integrating into local life beyond their protection duties. Hawk himself purchased a small property outside town, close enough to maintain his role as primary liaison for the Martinez model initiatives, but allowing him the space and solitude that remained essential to his nature. His gruff exterior gradually became a familiar and welcome sight around Riverdale, particularly at the bakery, where he started each morning with coffee and whatever new recipe Elena was testing. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? The safe house flourished under the joint management of community volunteers and Iron Guardians protection specialists. Within its first year of operation, it provided refuge for 17 families escaping dangerous situations, each benefiting from the comprehensive support model developed through Elena and Sophia's experience. For Sophia, the years that followed brought healing and growth. The nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of future possibilities. Her Guardian Alley vest hung prominently in her bedroom, not as a reminder of trauma, but as a symbol of the strength she had discovered within herself. On the third anniversary of the day she had written the truth in her journal, Sophia approached Eleanor with a request that reflected how far she had come in her healing journey. I want to visit Uncle Roberto in prison, she said, her voice steady and determined. Not because I miss him or forgive him, but because I want him to see me strong and not afraid anymore. The request initiated careful discussions with Dr. Winslow, with the prosecutor who had handled their case, and with Hawk, who had become a trusted advisor in all significant decisions. Eventually, with proper preparations and safeguards, the visit was arranged. The federal prison where Roberto served his sentence was a 5-hour drive from Riverdale. Elena and Sophia made the journey accompanied by Hawk and 2 other Iron Guardians, their motorcycles forming a protective escort for the car carrying mother and daughter. Are you sure about this? Elena asked one final time as they approached the prison gates. We can turn around right now if you've changed your mind. Sophia touched the pendant containing the stone Hawk had given her years earlier. I'm sure, Mom. I need him to see me now, not as the scared little girl he threatened. The visitation room was stark and institutional. Tables bolted to the floor, guards positioned at regular intervals, the atmosphere heavy with regulated interaction. When Roberto was brought in, the physical changes in him were immediately apparent. Prison had diminished him. the authoritative presence he had once projected, replaced by the hunched shoulders and wary eyes of a man existing in a world where he held no power. He stopped short when he saw who his visitors were, clearly not having been told in advance. For a moment, Elena feared he might refuse the visit. Then, with visible effort to compose himself, he approached the table where they waited. "Elena, Sophia." His voice was subdued, lacking the confidence that had once made his simplest statements feel like commands. "I didn't expect to see you." "That was the point," Sophia said clearly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "You didn't expect me to tell the truth in my journal either, or for Mom to stand up to you, or for an army of bikers to protect us. You didn't expect any of it, because you thought we were weak." Roberto's gaze dropped to the Guardian ally vest Sophia had deliberately worn for this meeting. "I see they've got you wearing their colors now." "We wear them by choice," Elena corrected him, "because we're proud of our association with people who stand against men like you." The conversation that followed was brief and tightly controlled. Sophia asked the questions she had prepared with Dr. Winslow's guidance, not seeking understanding or forgiveness, but asserting her right to answers after years of manipulation and fear. Roberto answered with the subdued affect of a man who had lost everything. His business empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed, his freedom taken for decades to come. When the allotted visitation time ended, he remained seated as they prepared to leave. "Why did you come?" he asked finally. "After all this time?" Sophia adjusted her vest, the gesture unconscious but powerful in its symbolism. "So you could see what happens when a frightened child tells the truth, and people who care decide to protect her. So you would know that we're not afraid of you anymore. So this would be the last thing you remember about us." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Outside the prison gates, Hawk waited with the other Iron Guardians, their motorcycles positioned for immediate departure. "How did it go?" he asked as Elena and Sophia emerged. Sophia considered the question seriously. "Good," she said finally. "Like closing a book you don't want to read again." The ride back to Riverdale was different from the tense journey to the prison, a sense of completion, replacing apprehension, the rhythmic sound of motorcycle engines escorting them home, creating a soundtrack for this final chapter in their direct engagement with Roberto. 5 years after Sophia first wrote the truth in her journal, the changes initiated by that single act of courage had rippled far beyond one family or one town. The Martinez model had been implemented in communities across the country, creating partnerships between traditional protection systems and networks like the Iron Guardians. Elena had become a nationally recognized advocate for domestic violence prevention, speaking at conferences and consulting with organizations developing similar programs. Her Guardian ally vest accompanied her to these events, a visual representation of the unlikely alliance that had transformed her from victim to leader. Sophia, now 13, had developed her own voice in this movement. With Elena's guidance and continuing support from Dr. Winslow, she had created a program called Truth Tellers that visited schools nationwide, encouraging children to speak up when they felt unsafe and educating teachers about appropriate responses to disclosures. The Iron Guardians had evolved as well, their protection work now more visible and integrated with community resources, while maintaining the independence and rapid response capabilities that made them effective. Hawk, while still an imposing figure in his leather vest and on his motorcycle, had become a respected consultant to law enforcement agencies on witness protection and family safety protocols. On the 5th anniversary of what Riverdale now officially recognized as Courage and Protection Day, a permanent monument was unveiled in the town square, a bronze sculpture depicting a child stepping forward from shadow into light, surrounded by stylized figures representing protection and support. The plaque at the base read simply, "For Sophia, who told the truth and for all the children who will find their voices because of her courage. Protected always by those who understand that sometimes guardians arrive on unexpected wings. As the crowd dispersed after the dedication ceremony, Hawk found Sophia sitting on a bench near the monument, observing people's reactions as they paused to read the plaque. "Heavy stuff, having a monument with your story on it," he commented, sitting beside her. Sophia shrugged with the casual self-consciousness of early adolescence. "It's not really about me anymore. It's about what happened because of what I did." "That's a mature perspective," Hawk observed. "I've had good teachers," Sophia replied, glancing at him sideways with a small smile. "Not all of them in school." They sat in companionable silence, watching the Iron Guardians mingling with townspeople, no longer an unusual sight in Riverdale, but a regular accepted part of community life. The integration that had seemed so improbable 5 years earlier had become ordinary, transforming both the town and the motorcycle club in the process. "Will you always stay?" Sophia asked suddenly. "The Iron Guardians, I mean, in Riverdale." "In some form," Hawk answered honestly. "The chapter here is permanent now, but people move on, take on different roles. That's healthy. Evolution, not abandonment." Sophia nodded, processing this. "Mom says I might want to go to college far away someday. That it's okay to build my own life wherever it takes me." "She's right," Hawk agreed. "Your courage created safety here, but that doesn't mean you have to stay here forever. The whole point of freedom is being able to choose your own path." "But the Iron Guardians would still be—" Sophia trailed off, searching for the right words. "Always," Hawk confirmed, understanding what she was asking. "Distance doesn't change the vow we made. Guardian allies are part of our family forever, wherever they go." As the 5th annual Courage and Protection Day celebration continued into evening, Elena joined them on the bench, taking in the scene around them. "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Sophia hadn't left that journal open on her desk that day," she mused. "If Miss Bennet hadn't seen it, if she had kept the promise about it being private." "Someone would have noticed eventually," Hawk said. "The truth has a way of finding its path to light." "But would you have found us?" Elena pressed. "Would the Iron Guardians have known we needed protection?" Hawk had no easy answer for that counterfactual question. The reality was that many families remained trapped in situations like Elena and Sophia had endured. Their truths unheard, their safety compromised, their isolation complete. "That's why we keep doing this work," he said finally. "Because for every Sophia who finds her voice and is heard, there are others still waiting for someone to listen. For every Elena who escapes, there are others who haven't found their way out yet. And that's why we help you now," Sophia added, with the clarity that had always characterized her perspective. "Because we know what it's like to be the ones needing protection. And we know what it's like when an army of bikers decides to stand between you and danger." As darkness fell over Riverdale, the now traditional light ceremony began. Motorcycles illuminating the town square in synchronized brilliance, pushing back the shadows in a visual representation of the protection that had become their legacy. In that circle of light stood Eleanor and Sophia Martinez, no longer defined by fear or victimhood, but by the courage that had transformed not just their lives, but an entire community's understanding of protection, truth, and justice. Beside them stood the Iron Guardians, leather-clad, tattooed, outside conventional society's definitions of heroes, who had answered a frightened child's truth with unwavering commitment. Together, they had rewritten the ending to a story that begins far too often in American communities. The story of abuse protected by silence, of systems that fail those most vulnerable, of truth suppressed by fear. In Riverdale, that story had found a different conclusion. Because a child was brave enough to write the truth in a journal, because a teacher was wise enough to recognize a cry for help, because a mother found the strength to stand rather than run, and because an army of bikers united to keep them safe while justice took its course. As the lights illuminated the faces gathered in the town square, old and young, bikers and townspeople, survivors and protectors, they revealed the most important truth of all, that sometimes the most powerful defense against darkness is the simple courage to speak and the unexpected guardians who arise to ensure that truth is heard.